All right. All right. Good day and welcome to today's section of 30 Days of Code Challenge brought to you by Codeflex. Um, Today is the day 7 of this challenge, and we will not be talking much today as we will be finishing what we started in the last section, that is the day 6 section. So in the day 6 section, we introduce us to CSS, tell us what CSS was, and also describe how it is used and it is used for. Then we talk about how it is used. We described 3 ways CSS can be used to apply styles to our web structure. So I think we stopped at inline CSS. No, no, sorry, internal CSS. So we were not able to talk about external CSS. So today we will look at external CSS, which we are going to be using throughout the rest of this challenge, right? So we talked about inline, we talked about internal, just for the purpose of awareness, right? But for henceforth, we are going to be using external CSS, right? So what is external CSS? External CSS is a way of applying CSS to our HTML via an external file, right? So the way we created a file for our HTML, we also create a file for our CSS, right? Instead of putting the styles in the head of our HTML document, we are creating a separate file for CSS. So we are saying HTML file should hold HTML, while CSS should hold all our styles. This is usually the most preferred way of styling your um, HTML, especially when you have a big page, right? So you know that when you are having styling issues, you know where to go to. When you think your issue is coming from your HTML, you also know where to go to. So you don't have to paint your HTML with styles using inline or make your HTML head so complex by having your styles in the HTML head. It's not actually a bad idea, but it just looks more legit to have, separate file for your styling and separate file for your structure, right? So today we are going to be looking at external styling of our CSS. The first thing we will have to do is to create a file, an external file. And how do we create a CSS file externally? The same way we create HTML file by giving it a file name and then adding the .html extension. To create an external CSS file, we add the file name and then add a .css extension. So like what you are seeing here, I created this HTML, giving it index, then I added the extension .html to make it an HTML file. As I want to create the CSS, I give it a name of styles and I added what the .css extension. That makes it a CSS file. So now, like I said, it's not enough for me to have an HTML and a CSS file. That doesn't mean that automatically my external file can now be styling my HTML. No, I still need to make the external file recognize the HTML that it's going to pick elements from to add styles to, right? So how do I do that? Having created my two files, I need to link them together. That is where external CSS linking comes into play. How do I link my CSS? I'm going to delete all these styles we have up here because I'm going to have to use them in our external file. So, okay, instead of deleting them, let me just copy them, right? I'm going to delete all this from here. Let's refresh. Okay, let me reload my live server. So all I need to do for me to link my CSS file to my HTML file is to use the link tag in my HTML head. Right now I'm in the HTML head, so all I will just do is to link it using the link tag. Right, I created a link, I give it a rel of style sheet. It is the href that is going to tell where my CSS file is. So I'm saying it's just like I'm telling the browser, for instance, I'm telling the browser, I say display this HTML, right? Display this HTML, get the style from so place. So where the style is coming from and the style name, the style part is what I'm going to put in the href, right? So that the browser will be able to will be able to add the file as it's getting the document, right? So the name of the file is styles.css. I don't need to really part because why? I'm just putting styles.css because the CSS and the HTML are inside the same folder. Assuming I have the CSS outside this folder, I will have to part into it, right? I will have to part into it probably using absolute part, right? But because they are inside the same folder, which is usually the case in most of the time we are going to be working with HTML and CSS, right? So I'll call it style.css. So automatically I have linked my CSS to my HTML. So if I go to my CSS file and apply styles there, the HTML already understand that I have added style to my CSS. So the browser is going to display the HTML adding the CSS because they have been linked together. So these styles I copied, I'll just paste them here and you see that immediately they work exactly the same way. So let's add more file, trying to use more properties because CSS also have a lot of CSS properties, right? A lot of properties. So we may not be able to cover each and every one of those properties, but those that we often use commonly, right? We will try to use them because um coding is actually in the practice. That's just the truth, right? The more you practice, the more you get to know CSS properties. The more you write CSS properties, the more you know them, right? You are going to, as little as display is, you are going to have to be trying to remember it until it stays in your head, right? As simple as padding is, as a beginner, you may be finding it difficult to remember that it's actually padding, but consistent coding and use of those properties will make them remain in your head after a short period of time. So we'll just try to use as many as possible. When we say CSS properties, what do they really mean? We are talking about um the what will I call it? The particular property you want to add to a style, to an HTML element. They are usually paired. Once you give a property, the property should have a value, right? Just as you are seeing on the screen. Padding, for instance, is a property and the value of that padding is 0. What that means is I am saying give space. So I'm saying this is what you are going to do. You should give space. That is property. The property I want you to achieve now is space. Now I'm now saying okay, the value of space should be 0 pixel, right? It's very simple. So the same thing with font family and all of that. I'm saying the property I want you to apply now is font family, and this is the value I want you to apply. This is the font family I want you to apply. The value I want is width. The property I want is width. I want you to apply 20 rem width. So that's just it. That's why they usually say they are paired, because you writing a property without adding a value is like it's useless, and writing a value without writing a property is also useless. And most of the cases you to even give you error, right? So now we have this. One thing we can do is to make everything be at the center, properly aligned to the center. So to do that, we can just add. We can add. We can go to the UL and give it. So what's containing all of this? Okay, why not just go to header? This is header, right? And give it a text align of center. This is another property, right? This is another property. We picked how the tests should align themselves, and we are saying they should align themselves at the center. Now, everything is supposed to be properly aligned at the center, but there's probably an issue why they are not all aligned at the center. And the issue is that we have given absolute width, right? If you look at our logo, it's having an absolute width of 100 pixel, and also our nav is having an absolute width of 50%. Now let's try something now. Let's try to increase the width to, let's take this one to 200. Are you seeing changes? The reason why it didn't apply at the exact center before is because there is no enough space. That 100 px did not give room for enough space for them to adjust comfortably, right? So I'm going to do the same to this. I'll change it to 200 pixel also, and now you see that everything is properly at the center, right? Everything is properly at the center. That means they now have enough space to breathe, right? So what else can we do? We don't like the way the nav elements, sorry, the navigation elements, right? The way they are stacked on top of each other. We probably want them to lay flat one after the other. And as while we can use flexbox, I will not want to use flexbox until we talk about flexbox. Uh, what am I saying? Display flex or display grid, right? So I want to use what we have in our disposer, talking about display block and display inline, right? So we look at the property of display. We pick two and just talk about them and use them, which is display block and display inline. So when we say something should display block, what we simply mean is each of the elements should take a new line and occupy the full width. That's what it means to display block. But when we say display inline, we are telling uh, content to lay side by side horizontally, right? So what we can do here is to give li. This is li. Li is the list, which is what we have on top of each other here. So what we can do here is to tell li to display inline like this, and it and that's all. You can see that it's displaying inline. It displayed inline but ran into another problem. What is happening now is also width issue. Now, for us to really know what is happening, I want to give my nav. For instance, I'm giving my nav a width, so sorry, a border. I want to make it visible. So I want to give it a border of 1 px solid red, right? You can see that there is no enough space for them to expand. the only space available for them is what they have used, so they can no longer expand. Assuming there is enough space, they will actually lay flat. So to confirm this, let's increase the width of the nav. Let's give it enough space and see. Let's say, let's make it 600. You see that they have when they have enough space to breathe, they breathe down, right? They make sure that they spread out very well the way we want them to be, right? So that's that. And we also want to add gap. If we are using flex or grid, we will be able to, we will have access to the property called gap. We will just say gap 100 pixel, right? Give a gap of 100 pixel. But because we are not doing that, we don't have, as we are not displaying flex or displaying grid. What we are displaying is inline. We don't have access to that gap property, right? They are reserved for this display, right? So what we can do is to create a margin, right? We create a margin between the elements, right? So we can give all the margin, all the element, all the li, give them a margin of left, right? So if I come here and say margin left, right? I've selected li, that means all the li, right? All the list elements should have a margin left of say 20 px, right? You see them, they space from each other, right? So that's just it. The problem we are going to have is that we are going to have a problem, right? The problem we will have is that all elements are having margin from the left. That means even the first element is going to have margin from the left, right? If we are really gone deep into CSS, there is a way you can select out of the four elements, you select only first, second, third, and fourth, and give them left margin, right? So that the first element does not need to have a left margin because it does not need to space. It doesn't need any space from its left end. The only space it needs is from the right end, of which the next element is already creating that space. But because we have not gotten there, we will leave it like this. And right, what we can also do is give navigation a top margin because it's too close. Now we are done with the border. I just wanted us to visualize the navigation. It's usually very helpful when you apply borders, when you are having challenges with your layout. Just throw in one pixel border of a very visible color, then you'll be able to know the areas you are working with. It makes things really very easy for you. So I'm going to take it out because I don't need it anymore. And I want the navigation elements to at least have a little space between them and the logo Codeflex and the Codeflex logo. So I will give it a margin top. I'm coming here now to give it a margin top, right? I'm giving it a margin top of let's say 10 px, right? And that will work, right? Now if you look at it, I'm now having two margin. The first one at the top is margin, just margin, which told you is the short form of writing margin top, margin left, margin right. So if I still want to use that top one, I can still impute top margin, margin top in that, so that I will just have one line. How do I do that? Like I said, I can have all the four sides, right, recorded in just the short form of using margin, right? The first one will be the top, the second one will be the right, the third one will be the bottom, and the fourth one will be the left, right? So if I come here and say I want the top to be, which is the first one, the top to be 10 pixel. Sorry. 10 px, which I have here, and I want the bottom to be 0, and I want the right, sorry, I want the right to be auto, sorry, because the right is actually auto. I want the right to be auto, right? That's exactly the same thing. So I can take this out now and it will still be the same thing because I've already replaced it there. I've created space for the 10 pixel top margin inside my margin shortcut, right? The first one is top. This first auto, which is the next one, is right. The 0 is for bottom and the last auto is for left. So I have still achieved the same thing with this. Also, I think my nav elements are too big. So what is responsible for this my nav element, this test, is the a tag inside my li. So I'm going to come here and select it, say a, right, and give it a font size. I'm really tired. First, I'm giving it a font size of say 16 px, or too small. Let's make it 20 px, right? And they are now like this. So I also want to give them a color that is visible. I want to give it a white color. Then there's another thing, it's underlined. So I want to also remove that underline by using word text decoration. That's actually a text decoration. You have, if you look at this place, you have a lot of text decoration. You can see underline, non, overline. If I use line through, for instance, it's going to draw that line across. You see that? But I just want it to be none because I want it to live there, right? So now you see that we no longer have those lines. Sorry. So far we have used plenty of CSS properties. We have used padding, margin, font family, font size, text align, background, color, width, list styles, display, text decoration, and there are still more, right? There are more depending on what we are doing, right? And what needs to be done. We are going to be using properties according to what we need to do, right? It is what we need to do that determines the properties that we think of to use, right? So, like I said, this section is going to be a very short section just to complete what we started in the last section, right? So, I also, before I end this section, I want to remind you that you have to always make sure that you check those videos and watch them closely, right? And make sure you comment after watching, and make sure you share them, make sure you like them, right? So, thank you very much for being part of today's section. I will see you in the next section. Goodbye.